Welcome to Spicer and Company. I'm Sean Spicer.
And I'm Lindsay Keith. Well, Sean, can you believe that we're less than 50 days away from the presidential election? It's crazy.
Yep.
You know, we were just talking before the show how we often have members of the Trump campaign or political pundits discuss what needs to take place on this final home stretch. But, you know, sometimes we're using inside baseball terms like ground game or voter contact. But for our viewers who may not be using this type of lingo every day, can you help them understand what these terms actually mean?
Yeah, I know sometimes we get caught up in all of the campaign and Washington terms, but you know, the bottom line is that the ground game is getting your volunteers, getting your people out there to knock on doors, to contact voters, to establish whether or not they're going to vote for you, whether they're going to vote for your opponent, or whether or not there's something you can do to persuade them. Each side goes about this in a different way, and it's not just one or the other. It's making a phone call, it's putting mail in their boxes, it's advertising. But the most effective way, when it really comes down to it, is knocking on somebody's door and having that human interaction team. Now, the two teams, Lindsay, have gone in two different directions. The Biden team has said because of COVID, they're going to completely focus on phone calls, emails, texts, make it all virtual. The Trump campaign, recognizing the success that they had last cycle, is saying, no way, we're going to keep on the ground, we're going to take the precautions necessary, but we're going to knock on the doors and have that voter contact, because it's a lot more than just contacting the voter. It's about what they collect at the door. And so let's continue this conversation, because I think today we are very, very lucky to have an exclusive interview with the Trump campaign's political director, Carr. The campaign so far has made a ton of contact with voters. They have an army of actual volunteers out there in the field where knocking on doors and making contact with people. 2,000 paid staffers in 17 states that have knocked on over 2 million doors and phone calls. The field operation has claimed to contacted over 90 million voters this cycle, including 12 million doors since June alone. To break this all down, to get a better understanding onto why this is so important, I want to bring in the Trump campaign's political director, Carr. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Sean. I appreciate it.
You bet. So I just walked through this. Why is knocking on doors so important to this campaign, and why have you invested so much in it?
So we saw in 2016 that, you know, before 2016, we would focus a lot on doing voter contact by phone calls. But now we do much more doors than we've ever done before. And the reason why we do it is because nothing replaces when you talk to a voter face to face. And the majority of our volunteers are walking within their own neighborhoods. So they're talking to, you know, friends and neighbors, people that they already know and they have a relationship with. And to a voter, talking to someone that they know is a much more credible messenger. And our door knockers, our volunteers focus on three things. One is voter registration, two is voter persuasion, if it's a lean voter, and three is get out the vote.
So what does the conversation look like? You knock on my door, and what do you say?
Hello, Sean. My name is Carr.
Hey, Chris, good to see you.
Good to see you. I'm a Trump neighborhood team leader. Just walking the neighborhood today, trying to find out, you know, which way you're leaning in this election between President Trump and Joe Biden. You know, do you and anyone else in your house, any other registered voters, have you made your decision yet on which way you're voting?
Okay, so you guys develop a voter score on every single voter. So you have that thing, you knock on the door, I tell you, yes, Chris, I'm voting for Trump, or hey, you know what, I'm not really sure. What do you do with that data?
So the first thing is that, you know, if you let us know that you are supporting the president and you're supporting other Republicans on the ticket, the next question that I'm going to ask you is, what method do you prefer voting? Would you like to vote by absentee? Would you like to vote? Are you planning on voting in person, early voting, or on election day? And that way we have a better idea on how to target you when the time is right to get out the vote. If you're a lean voter, based on that voter score, I'm going to have certain messages on my Walk app, on my iPhone, and I'm going to have a script tailored just for you based on your affinities, which are all come from the voter scores. So I'll talk about, you know, either the Second Amendment, if you're a big Second Amendment person, how the president, for example, is a big supporter of the Second Amendment. If you're a social conservative, I'm going to talk about the Supreme Court justices that he appointed.
So you suck up all this. You suck up all this information. I tell you, you know, Chris, I'm leaning that way. I'm a big Second Amendment guy. I'm pro-life. What do you do with all the data? Where does it go?
So all that information will go back. I'll enter it into my iPhone, and then at real time it goes back to the RNC and is housed in our data warehouse. So what we're doing now is that we're continuing to build the Sean Spicer voter profile. So now we have other data points on you, so that this cycle and actually in the future we know how to better target you, not only at the door but on a phone call or by mail or by online advertising or email, etc.
So how has COVID changed all of this interaction that you had from 2016 to now?
That's a great question. It changed it a lot, and I'll give you an example. So, once a month we had been doing for the last year and a half national weekends of action, and that's where we train our volunteers. It's an exercise for us to try to perfect our system. So when we get into post Labor Day, which we find ourselves in now, we're ready to go. And so in mid-March of this year, we had decided literally the Wednesday before that Friday, I think it was like March the 13th, we had decided to go all virtual. I had never obviously had done a all virtual campaign, nor had anybody else. So within 24 hours, we were able to transition to an all virtual campaign, meaning that all of our trainings that particular weekend were, on Skype or Zoom or whatever. They were all online. We had suspended all of our door-to-door voter contact and had gone strictly to phone calls. So everything was essentially a virtual campaign between mid-March and mid-June. And then mid-June, we started transitioning back where we were able to, depending on that state's guidelines, to the more traditional campaign and face-to-face interaction with our trainings and door-to-door.
What's interesting is that because of COVID, a lot of people are now home during the day. So normally, I remember back when I started in campaigns, you wouldn't go out until, 5 o'clock, because that's when people started to come home from work. Now you guys have people that are working from home all day. Are you capitalizing on that?
Absolutely, we are, and that's a very good point, because we have seen that our contact rate, either by phone or at the door, has shot up enormously. Because you're right, people are at home. So for us, it's not only are we hitting a target-rich universe, but we're getting far greater IDs and connects, as we call it, than we had ever had before.
So the Biden campaign, as I mentioned in the introduction, has gone all virtual, right? They aren't going back on the thing. The interesting thing about this is one of the super PACs that's supporting Joe Biden acknowledged that the strategy that you're employing is working. Let me read you what they had to say. They said, door knocking is in our DNA. We believe that there is nothing, and the evidence supports this, that is as effective as a well-deployed face-to-face interaction. That said, we've lost in texture. What we've lost in texture and interaction face-to-face, we've tried to make up for it in scale. That's Matt Morrison, who's the executive director of the Working America PAC, which is a liberal PAC that supports Joe Biden. Chris, they're making the case that this isn't going to affect their ability on the left to get out votes for Biden. Do you think it will, though?
Well, I'm glad you bring this point up, because I think there's an article in Politico this morning where some of the down ballot candidates are breaking away from the Joe Biden campaign, where they're starting to do doors, because I think they're realizing that we're so much further ahead than they are, especially with the ground game. But also, number two is that we had found out a couple of weeks ago that in Wisconsin, as an example, that some of their paid organizers, they don't even live in the state. Some of their organizers are in California. So I don't know how you're able to effectively organize voters for Joe Biden all the way out on the left coast. I don't see how that is effective. I mean, we're all for them doing it because I think we're kicking their butts every day. So that's what they chose to do, and I'm glad where we are right now.
Okay. Chris, we got to take a quick break. When we come back, I really want to focus our conversation on the mail-in and absentee ballot program that you guys are employing and why this is so supportive. We're going to be joined by your colleague, the National Field Director there on the campaign, Elliot Eccles. After they're done, we got a big show ahead of you. State Department spokesman Morgan Ortagus is back with the show to talk about Trump's historic Middle East peace deal. Former acting director of national intelligence Rick Grenell is also going to be here to weigh in on that as well. And new travel warnings for China. You're not going to want to miss this. Chris Carr is coming right back, though.